Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petralis, and we are super excited. We got a great coach on here today, but just a few little announcements before we get started. One, I want to give a shout out my man David Cole over at Mercer University for firing away some swag to me, some football swag, what they wear on the sidelines. I was thrilled. Big fan of David, and he was a big fan. People loved him on the show, so I was so glad to see that he could fire some swag away. But we're going to continue today down the street of high school basketball, and we're going to switch it over to the boys side. We've had coaches on the last couple of weeks: Matt Freeman out of Braintree, Dave Fallon out of Hanover, and this week, Brian Fisher, excuse me. Dave Fallon's out of Millis. I had him on earlier. Brian Fisher out of Hanover. So we've been really traveling the world of girls basketball, and today we're going to travel the world of boys high school basketball. And I couldn't think of a better guest to get on here to get things started. As you know, I'm from Wilmington, Massachusetts, so I love looking up our local high school coaches. And as soon as I saw this guy and what he brought to the table, we had him connect and get him on the show. But the head basketball coach at Wilmington High School boys team was also a Wilmington High School athlete. Did a little homework on him. 852 points as a basketball player, was the captain of the soccer team and the baseball team over at Wilmington. He's also a Hall of Famer as an athlete and also as a member of the 98 soccer team. So someone who's really been around the game for a long time and coaching and athletes and kids, and especially doing it in his hometown. I thought this would be a tremendous story to tell today. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, Dennis Ingram of Wilmington High School.
Thanks so much for having me on, Anthony. I really appreciate what you're doing here, telling coaches stories. So often we just hear coaches' names in the paper, and for you to be able to dig a little deeper and tell their side of the story, how they kind of got to where they are, I think it's really great, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been in your guys' shoes for a long time, so I know how it feels, and I know the work that goes into it. And it's just important to let an average fan out there know what goes into the world of high school coaching, college coaching, and everything in between. So it's an honor having you on here. So I just start off with every guest just kind of asking the basic question of just talk about your start into basketball. I mean, you're a local legend, right? So you were a great athlete at Wilmington. You grew up here. You work real competitive, and even just to read some quotes I have here from your high school coach, someone I know is a pretty big role model to you. He said he is a terrific role model. This is Jim McCoon speaking, when you got hired as the boys basketball coach. He said, Dennis is one of the best kids who's walked through this program. He might be the best. He's a gamer. Every night and every practice that Dennis Ingram is here to play. That's pretty strong words. I mean, I hear coaches talk about some of the athletes they've had in the past, but those are pretty strong words saying that you might be one of the best, if not the best, to walk through. So talk about a little bit as an athlete in Wilmington growing up.
Sure. It only took me a couple of dollars to make sure that he had some nice things to say about me in the newspaper called. No, just kidding. Jim's such a great guy, and he was so incredibly important in my development in basketball and as a young man. I was so lucky to grow up in a town of Wilmington. It's a really great community. I had great friends, great experiences with youth sports, great time growing up. And when I got to high school, I was lucky enough to play for a coach who was so orientated and detailed in his preparation, in his game plan, in everything that went into the game. And it was really incredible to be a part of and to kind of be a sponge as a 15-year-old kid and kind of take it all in as you have this great coach kind of showing you the way, showing you how to get there.
That's awesome. And I think that's just so important because, the big reason I got into the coaching was because of the high school football coach that I had, right? Just kind of like you said, led you down this path of understanding and correlating sports and life and how to be and, your everyday effort, your everyday, way you treat people, all of that. And I think that's just so important when you have a mentor like that, really influences you and makes you want to come back. So now you came back to, after graduating high school, you came back, right out the gate when, college and everything else to come back and start coaching. So how did you get into the world of coaching? Because I know you're just more than basketball.
Yeah,
you've coached a lot in Wilmington, but just talk about your path into coaching.
Sure. I went to Framingham State to play basketball, and I ended up only staying there for a year and a half. And I use that kind of as a story to tell the kids that I coach now. It wasn't a good academic fit for me. I only went there to play basketball. And sometimes the lessons we learn in life are difficult ones. That was a difficult lesson for me. I needed a place that was a little bit different educationally. So when that ended, I didn't know that when I was 15, I was going to be friends with Coach McCune, Jimmy McCune, as I grew up into my early 20s and into my, adulthood. So I called him and I said, I don't know what to do. This is the first winter in the last, how many years that I don't have basketball. And he said, well, when I was a senior, he brought in a new freshman coach who I think is actually going to be your next guest. One of my lifelong friends, Mark Antonelli.
Oh, yeah?
He was the freshman coach at Wilmington High School. And because I was a senior in high school, we were somewhat close in age and we became friends. And he moved on in this time frame to be the head coach at the now closed St. Clement's High School, which I can't believe the doors are closed.
Yeah.
So he called me up and he said, do you want to get into coaching? It might be something that you really love and you can be passionate about. And I need a JV coach. So I took it and I was with him for a couple of years at St. Clement. And then he went over to Somerville to be the JV coach and he took me with him to be the freshman coach over at Somerville High School. So I had like 4 or 5 years away from Wilmington High School where I kind of got my feet, I dipped my toes into the water of the coaching world and kind of, figured out some things on how to do. And I also in that time started coaching baseball at Medford High School. We spoke about this. You're friendly with the AD over there, Bobby. I coached baseball at Medford for, maybe 4 or 5 years. And then I became the JV soccer coach at Wilmington. So within the blink of an eye, really, I was a 3-sport coach. I went from being someone who was kind of unsure about what my next move was to I was a 3-sport high school coach. And I did that for, 13 years. It was fantastic. It was great.
Yeah, there's something to be said about someone who's just like, once you coach in the fall, like going back to that first year, then all of a sudden there's like, I remember there was like an indoor track position open. I was like, all right, yeah, I'll get a bunch of football players to do track. I'll coach track. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, spring track has an opening. And like you said, before you know it, you're coaching 3 sports and you're really into it. Like you love it. You're young. It's like the only thing you have to really worry about. And you're like, this is awesome. This is great. So, I totally understand that. Now, let me ask you this, coaching many sports, how does like coaching soccer help you as coach, coaching basketball, and how does coaching basketball help you coach baseball? I mean, talk about those sports and just being an assistant coach, because they are completely different sports that have completely different sets of rules and different purposes. So your mentality is different as a coach. You're always facing these situations. I mean, talk about your growth as an assistant for that long. Coaching, I mean, for all intents and purposes, year round.
Right, without a doubt. And I think it was so valuable in my development as a coach to be an assistant coach, to kind of, climb the ladder, if you will, right? In basketball, I started as, someone low down, went to, St. Clement, it was the JV team, but more or less I had 7th and 8th grade just because of the structure of the school. I'm sure you know that.
Right.
But then, going to the public school at Somerville, starting as a freshman coach, and then working my way back to Wilmington and becoming a JV coach, and then slowly climbing the ladder there. And then in the other sports too, to be an assistant coach, it gives you such a good idea from a different point of view on an athlete's development and what the whole process is. So, and I've been lucky to coach for underneath some really great coaches too. And in soccer, Steve Scanlon, he's been coaching there literally since his father had the job. His father was my high school soccer coach. He passed away in 2001 and Steve took over, and he also coaches hockey there. I think he has over 750 career high school wins, a handful of state championships. Just an unbelievable coach and someone to have at your disposal to ask questions, to bounce off of, why are we doing this? Why'd you do this? You practiced on this day and you gave him that day off. What was the thinking behind that? So to have someone like that and be an assistant coach for them, you really get to, sharpen your own skills in the off season for a different sport. So it's really unique, but I really think it played a huge role in my development as a coach.
Yeah, and I think perspective's everything. Like even in our line of works, like perspective of just seeing how other people have done it for so long, what works, what doesn't, what fits your style, what doesn't. I mean, that's the ultimate education. As an assistant coach, you have an ultimate education of following the guys in front of you, and especially when you have really good ones. Then you understand the difference between winning a game and losing a game by the small little things that happen inside of a game that, you wouldn't pick up if you didn't have different perspectives from different guys and been in those situations. It's amazing stuff. So now you kind of commit and you go to Wilmington. And like you said, you were an assistant coach there for a very long time in 3 sports. We talk about when you first walked in there, like here you were, this high school, like, real good athlete. You knew you walk in. I remember going back to Arlington Catholic and coach, and I was like walking in like Conor McGregor, like, flaunting my arms around everywhere, thinking I was the man. But what I realized was like I didn't know even a quarter of the game until I started coaching. Because as a player, you just do what you're told and you listen and you say, okay. And then you get to the other side of it and you're like, wow, this game's a lot different. So just talk about your experience of going back to the place that, where you started it all.
Yeah, it was funny. When I first got back to Wilmington as a coach, the athletic director at the time, Mr. Ed Harrison, who was just huge, just such a great guy to me from my early high school days throughout my coaching days. He introduced me to the principal, who was a math teacher when I was in high school. And she jokingly said, "Oh, Mr. Ingram, I think you gave us a hard time when you were in high school, didn't you, young man?" So to come back and kind of, look at it through a different light and be, not a grown-up, but, you're more mature. You're not a kid anymore. And you get that opportunity to kind of prove to people that you have grown up. You have learned lessons. The people like Ed Harrison have taught you many valuable lessons that have helped you grow up into a responsible adult. And it's really a great opportunity to have that and to prove that.
Yeah, and it's just there's something about it where you work so hard there as an athlete, and you're going through what these kids have gone through, and you put in the sweat and the tears and the blood and the injuries and all of that stuff because it meant that much to you. So coming back to, I know that's just always like a great feeling, like you want to give it all to the place that you gave it all to X amount of years before that. So you're at Wilmington. I know you were an assistant for a few years, but then the job kind of opens up for you, or there's a job opening, I should say. Talk about the thought process of being like, I think I'm ready for this job, but also just the interview process a little bit for some of our younger coaches out there that may go through something similar, soon, if not down the road.
Sure. So when the job was posted, it was actually the timing of everything is just so funny. When you look back, when you get a little separated from it, you can look back and you can say, wow, the timing of things is just so funny. The AD that I was just referencing, Ed Harrison, announces that he's going to retire at the end of the school year. All right. I'm the assistant basketball coach. My friend is the varsity coach, and he decides that he's done. Okay. So, and you never know how these things are going to go. They open it up and anybody can apply. When we were looking for freshman coaches, we legit had people from different states applying for freshman basketball jobs. So anyone can apply. So you never know really which way it's going to go. So the AD puts together a committee of other coaches, a couple student athletes, an administrator, and, they bring in, I think he told me there was something like 25, 26 people applied for the job, and they brought in like 4 or 5 people for interviews. So when you go in for the interview, where you put together your portfolio and with all your coaching philosophy and a couple of sample practice plans and maybe some positive reinforcement reading material that you might pass out to the kids during the school year. And they drill you. They don't take it. Everybody in that room, but that doesn't matter. They come at you with some questions.
It's a different ball game.
It is, and you got to be ready because they want to see how you think on your feet. If you get a question that, it's a little off, are you going to, put your back up and say, what are you asking me that for? Are you going to be able to, take it in, digest it, and have an answer? Can you take some criticism? Stuff like that. So the interview went through. I thought it went great. A couple days later, they called me and said, and it was Mr. Harrison. And he said, I'm so proud of you. I met you when you were 15 years old, and to see you go from where you were as a 15-year-old to leaving that interview, I was so proud of you, to know you and to have a role and where you went from point A to point B.
Yeah, and I love it because the interview process, no matter what, even if you're someone who's been in the system, as an athlete in the system, at the end of the day, they're trying to hire someone who's best for the program, and that is sometimes making a tough decision or not hiring somebody that you may think is valuable because they belong to the community. But you also have to go in there and wow them, and that's exactly what you did to get the job. And and you can tell the energy that you have. I mean, I've been sitting here now for about 20 minutes, and I have kind of officially decided that you have the coolest background of any coach that I've had on here. It was between you and Tom Bingham of St. Bernard's. I was going back and forth for a little bit, but I got to give you the notch. I give you some credit here.
All right, I can give you a quick story about this one. So, I mean, probably similar to you, when COVID set in, you're an active guy. We're involved in sports, playing in men's league and, working out, going for runs. Your world changed. So, we're stuck in the house when it all first happened. And, we're going through some stuff in the basement, and I found this chest of all these old Sports Illustrateds I had from when I was a kid, from like 1988 all the way up to 2000. So my wife and I are going through them, and she knows I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. And I had all these Michael Jordan ones that were like tucked away in plastic. And she's like, you got a lot of them. So we went through them, and I had about 30. I think he's on 50. So I have 30. So we decided to kind of do one of the walls in the basement. With the frames.
I love it. It's awesome.
Cool. It's pretty cool. And it gave us something to do a little bit. We were looking for, you're looking for some of them on eBay and stuff like that. But I will say that I have 30 of them behind me. Probably 29 of them have my name on them from when I was a kid.
Oh, remember those? You get them in the mail, your name's on it.
Embarrassingly, one is from an elementary school that I went to when I was a kid. I must have borrowed it from the library and forgot to return it.
You put a star on that one.
Yeah.
But no, it's great. I just had to say it. I was making a decision there, and I finally was like, you know what? It is the best background I've seen. So, what I also love what I researched about you, Coach, is, obviously being a hometown guy, and here you are walking us through the interview process. But now you're the head coach, right? So you've learned from a lot of great coaches. You absorbed a lot of great information, probably seen a lot of great scenario basketball play out in your career to see things happen enough to kind of develop your own thoughts and ideas. What was something that you felt like getting the job, I need to either change about this program or to make it my program and doing something that I know immediately is going to impact us on the court?
So let me give you just a quick kind of recap on the boys basketball program. Wilmington was in the Merrimack Valley for, I don't know, years and years and years and years. And up until 1995, the athletic department switched to the Cape Ann League, which is a lot of smaller schools, some regional schools, mostly Division III schools. And at that time, Wilmington's numbers were low, and we were a comparable Division III in the size of our school. So we stayed in that league until 2011. By the mid-2000s, we did a really great job. I think that we won maybe 5 or 6 league titles in a row in the late 2000s. We had a lot of success in football. We had a lot of success in boys basketball, boys soccer, girls soccer, baseball, and a lot of different sports. And our town was growing. You live in town right now. You know that the town was growing at a pretty good rate, and all the projections that was going to keep going. So we made the jump in 2011 to the Middlesex League, which the Middlesex League is a monster of a league.
Any sport, pick a sport.
Right. So at that time, so right before that happened, Coach McCune retired, and his number one assistant, Coach Joe Maiella, took over, and the winning continued in the Cape Ann League. I think his last year in the Cape Ann League, we were like 18-2. He was the Division II Coach of the Year. Everything was great. And then we went to the Middlesex, and things got a lot different. We were playing teams, I'd say 85, 90% of the time that were larger than us. And things changed quickly. The winning that we were used to, it just stopped. And I think the year before Joe resigned, I think we only won 1 game. So things changed very quickly. Being a coach and seeing the dynamics of that, I understood what was going on. You're not playing smaller. It's still high school athletics. The majority of the time, the bigger school has some kind of advantage. Okay. And we were just no longer the biggest school. We were David every single night versus Goliath, just about. And you can fight, but at some point, there was no end in sight. So that kind of wore on us. So when I took over, one of the first things we did was we kind of changed up the non-league games.
I was going to ask you that, so that's good. Okay.
And I got some people criticized me for it, but you know what? I knew I had confidence in what I was doing. I know what I'm doing as far as finding an opponent. When we were in the Cape Ann League and we were winning, league titles, you could take your non-league games and schedule some iron right before the tournament. You could call a bigger school and say, February vacation, let's play 2 games right before the tournament, as almost a wake-up call to your team. Look, if you want to win in the tournament, this is the kind of team that you got to be able to beat. So we changed that up. Another thing that we did, so all those non-leagues now, we really try to just find comparable Division III teams, that we feel like we can compete against. Another thing that we did, and I really have to, my friend who is a selectman in town, and he's the former Shawsheen Tech coach, Greg Bandel, he approached me and he said, I got an inside connection here. Do you want to play a game against us at the Boston Garden? We got to sell X amount of tickets, and there's some things that we have to do, but it could be a pretty cool opportunity for us. And I was like, absolutely. That's great. So he did a lot of the legwork. He knew the guys who ran that program. The only thing that, Anthony, though, was our game was at 8:00 in the morning on Saturday. Excuse me. And they say, you can have your JV team scrimmage beforehand. It won't be official, and you can have your freshman team play at halftime. But, it's a whole scheduled day of game. So you got to go. So, we had to be in there at like 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday, which was kind of crazy. But to play on the Boston Garden, all the feedback that we got from all the kids involved and all the parents involved, it was a pain in the butt. You got to sell all these tickets, but at the end of the day, the kids loved it, and it was we thought it was such a great tool to show these middle school kids and these younger kids, like, this is something that we're willing to do. These are the sacrifices that we can do these cool things to try to spark some interest in the program.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I saw some of those pictures on social media, and I thought that was pretty fun to be able to do that. I saw that you guys were playing Shawsheen, so I figured there must have been something there, like, close school rivals or things like that, because I know in football they played each other for a few years too. And, at Coach Allen at the Catholic, we've been playing them since I've played, every
That's
year.
right.
Now we play them on Thanksgiving. So it's a great school to do it with too, which is awesome. So yeah, the Middlesex is a gauntlet. I mean, any coach I've had on, and I can tell you, like, in the football world, playing one team in the Middlesex, say, in a non-league schedule, you're like, oh, that's going to be a tough game. So I can't imagine when you're playing 6, 7, 8 of that and you're playing home and homes on top of it. So I know that can be real tough in that conference for sure. But, competing against some of those bigger teams and having your teams compete against them, talk about yourself systematically as a coach a little bit. Are you a system year to year, or do you have a system that you just have in place and you coach around that? Or do you have to kind of assess your talent a little bit and say, all right, year to year, we might have to switch up, being press or playing half court or playing zone, and maybe slow down the pace a little bit some years. I mean, how do you kind of assess all that as a coach?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think it really has to depend on what you have. I mean, when I was younger, I wanted to be, run and gun press, 32 minutes of hell like John Calipari used to do. But then if you don't have the kids to do that, then you're really setting them up for failure. You really have to take a look at the inventory that you have and what the kids' skill sets are, and start planning inside out with that. This year is such a strange year for us. We're playing 10 games. We have limited amount of times that we're allowed to practice during the week. It's snowing right now. We've already, we couldn't practice today. We've already been told we're not practicing tomorrow, and we're supposed to play on Wednesday. So, that is all, it's new, because one of the greatest things about coaching and coaching basketball is the preparation, building towards that game. So systematically, what we've done this year is we kind of changed everything up a little bit. We went to an offense where there's basically no calls. It's all predicated upon space, and what the defense gives you. That there's There's a couple principles that are built into it to kind of dictate how the flow starts, but it's all really built off of space. And the idea is to get the highest percentage shots that you can get, which are layups and catch and shoot threes. A couple of years ago, I'm lucky enough to have 3 varsity assistants. And after a tough loss, we were talking about the game, and one of them said, our basketball IQ is so low. How do we change our decision-making ability? How do we coach that up? So we think that this offense develops and improves basketball IQ. There's a greater effort in decision-making. We maximize players' confidence and technical skills with greater inclusion and involvement in practice. Everything's a small-sided game, and it's quick decisions, 0-second decisions, and it's all based off of space. So we're trying that out. And Anthony, I don't know if you know a lot of basketball coaches, but to not call any plays during a game, it's really a 180. It's a 180. In years previous, we've had our basic offense, and then we've had 5, 6 as the season goes, 7, 8, 9, 10 quick hitters, little options off of base offenses, and then we'd have all of our zone stuff. So by the end of the year, we're looking at all of this stuff that we're expecting our kids to retain, and reflecting at ourselves in the mirror, were they really retaining it? Probably not. So with this year being so different, and there's no state tournament, I went to a professional development course over the summer, and I saw this coach speak about this offense, and it really hit home. And I said, if there's a year to really see if this is something that can work, this is the year. And let's see how it looks. So we've done it. We've instilled it in practice. We've gone over it. We believe in it, and the outcome is pretty good. I think that we're a lot more aggressive in everything that we do, pretty much just based off of having this kind of mindset, off of these 6 principles of offense.
Yeah, and I know in the football world, there's been years that we just have to make our playbook more simplistic because, like your assistant coach alluded to, you're like, how much are they retaining here? How much are they understanding to cut their route shorter or make their route go deeper depending on coverage? And those are that's the IQ of sports. Like, he's absolutely right. So how do you coach that better? And I've had a lot of basketball coaches on here. So, and a lot of them I've talked to off camera. Yeah, I've never heard of that before. And I'm not a basketball guy who understands that as much. I'm a basic guy who can watch a game and really understand what's happening, but I don't know like the small details of set plays and calls and everything like that. But you alluded to it. How do you decide to do something like that? How do you as a staff now educate yourselves? You say, okay, we saw this guy talk one time. How are you as a staff now working together? And essentially, and I'm not saying this is your thought, but this season, you don't know what it's going to be like. So it's almost like a sense in a training camp of trying some stuff out and maybe putting it in and seeing what would work on a long haul, hopefully by next season where everything's back to normal a little bit.
Right. So it's funny, everything in athletics, and everything's stolen from somebody else. And the coaching network is such a fantastic thing. So I saw this guy speak, and I sent him an email, and I was like, I love this. Is there anything else you can give me? He sent me a full PowerPoint. He sent me multiple video clips, just great stuff. And he's also if you want to talk to this guy, he coaches high school up in Maine, and he's been running it. So all of a sudden I have all this stuff at my disposal, and I was able to, use this PowerPoint and these video clips during COVID and send them to my sub-varsity guys and say, hey, take a look at this. I'm really thinking about it. It's interesting. It's simple. It makes sense. It's kind of almost what we've been talking about for the last 3 years. And it's we just figured out what we're looking for. We've been talking around it. How do we do this? How do we do this? How do we do this? This is how we do it. So it's really great. And to have the coach, a college coach, come on and say, this is what we're doing, blah, 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 and have some, high school coach that he's never heard of email him. How many emails does this guy must have? But that's part of the coaching network and brotherhood and society. He gets right back to you and says, that's awesome, man. Let me see what I can do to help you out. Sends me a bunch of stuff and says, and you want to contact this guy because he's really good to talk to too.
Yeah. It's unreal. I mean, in this podcast, I mean, that's the type of success I've had. Like coaches want to like share information. Coaches want you to be like, this works. This is who I am. This is my system. This is my thought process. And yeah. And they want to get it out there. I mean, I think that's, and I've noticed that in the world of football, no matter what clinics you go to or coaches you talk to, they're the most over friendly people. Here's my email. Here's my Twitter. Here's my Instagram. Here's my phone number. Like, everything. And it's awesome. It's great to, have networks like that in sports and being able to have guys help you out and give you perspective. Now, you mentioned your assistant coaches and really running things by them. I mean, being an athlete in Wilmington and now being a head basketball coach at Wilmington, what type of coaches are you looking for in your program? I mean, obviously the on the court stuff and knowledge of the game, there's some aspect of it, right? But what are you looking for to be with these young kids every day, especially in a regular normal season? And maybe not so much this season, but even so this season, your coach is communicating with kids and communicating with families. I mean, what do you look for in a staff that you feel is successful to help you build what your vision is?
We look for good people to be, and that sums it up as simple as I can. I have a JV coach, a freshman coach, and then I have 3 varsity assistants. The JV coach, we've been friends since we were kids. He played in college. I played in college. We played against each other. We see the game similarly, but he's not a yes man. He's someone who can call me out on what I'm doing if he doesn't agree with what I'm doing. I really value his opinion. He's an educator in town. It's great to have him. He's like my bounce off guy, if you will. If I have an idea, he's the guy that I go to. Now, the other coaches, all of them in some capacity I've coached. So that's a really cool circumstance there. Is these are kids that I coached in some capacity when they were in high school. They've grown up, and now we have a different kind of relationship. So that's a really cool thing to be a part of, and seeing the development of, why you get into coaching is you love to see the development of young people, and you're taking people now who you coached and now, they're more or less your peers. But anytime we get somebody new that comes in, we always talk about the same kind of stuff. We want you to be loyal. And I heard Craig Turner, the Wilmington football coach, talk about that on your podcast earlier in the years, is you need people who are going to be loyal to you. Understand that you're the head coach. It's your voice, but you also want to give these kids and these young assistant coaches kind of a stage and an ability where they can kind of figure out what they're doing, because someone at some point gave you enough rope to see if you knew what you were doing. And you know what? Maybe you messed it up and maybe it wasn't perfect, but you figured it out and they let you kind of figure it out on your own. So what we'll do with our younger coaches is, the pregame warm-ups. We always tell our assistant coaches, it's all you. This is what we're running, right? These are the shots we like to get. This is what we're doing defensively. Figure it out. Come up with some kind of pregame routine for us. And I said, you can talk to the captains if you want. If you want to come back to me and say, I can't do it, that's fine. But this is a good opportunity for you to kind of, get your feet wet, show that you know what you're doing. And then there'll be one practice before the first game of the year. We'll say, okay, guys, we're just going to go over the pregame warm-up, what it's going to look like quickly. Coach so-and-so is going to run you through it. For those 5, 10, 15 minutes, it's his team, and I usually just sit back and let him do it. Let him figure it out. And I always tell him, let him figure it out. If you make a mistake, you make a mistake. You move on. It's no big deal. Practice is not supposed to be perfect. Practice is supposed to be messy. If you end up instructing something that you want them to do and you say, oh my God, that's not how I thought it was going to look, kill it. Say, guys, we need to switch this. This is obviously not working. You'll gain respect from them by being able to show them that you can call yourself out and be humble on any kind of mistake that you make,
Yeah. And I even know just from, being a head coach and have my assistant coaches, I tell my coaches, you got to have drills ready to go. I want to know what your drills are. I want to see excitement. I want to see energy, because at the end of the day, they are investing just as much time as you are, but your name's the one that's getting all the recognition, or the opposite, your name's the one getting smudged through the dirt, right? But at the end of the day, either way, that's what's happening, so like it kind of falls on the head coach, but the assistants, they grind, they work hard, and good head coaches, they let their assistants coach. That's why they're there. They want to develop. You got to give them the opportunity to develop. As much as you're developing your team, you are also responsible for developing your coaching staff. You have a certain criteria that you're looking for, whether that's alumni or people that just have experience, or like you said, just really good people. That's your system, and that's what you're looking to build. So, it's as much as us as coaches, we're looking to develop the program and develop the product on the court. We're also looking to develop our coaching staff, because after a while, you're hoping that your coaches are on the same page about a lot of the major things that you are, or know how to adjust out of it or do different things depending on what your opponent's kind of throwing at you. So it's always a development of your coaching staff too over years, what's really important, especially if you can hang on to good coaches for a long time.
Absolutely. And
yeah.
Anthony, every year we get older.
Yeah.
We get a year away from being, young. So if you have a couple of young guys, they seem to really connect with the high school aged guys, sometimes better than you can,
Yeah.
And that's an advantage, that's something that you can, you say, hey, what the heck's up with so-and-so today? And your assistant can go, oh yeah, I talked to him on the way in. You gotta, he says he's got this class that's killing him, and it's just all he's thinking about. Oh, okay. So I don't, so now and you can use that as an advantage.
Yeah, and it's just much different when you were an assistant coach at one time. That's what you were able to do with a lot of your players. You were able to have those conversations and kind of be the ear for your head coach a little bit. But now you're in the other shoes, right? So you need those dependable young guys a little bit to let you know maybe the bigger picture of something that's going on. And that's the hardest thing about being a head coach is, especially if you're not around those kids in the morning, like you don't know how their day started off. You don't know what happened in school. They could have gone to a fight with their girlfriend or their boyfriend, or,
right.
they could have, got a bad test score, like you just don't know. So when you get them on the court or get them on the field, you're trying to figure out something's off, but what's off, and a lot of times those are the young guys that can go over and really relate to them. So that's great. It's awesome. Talk about tryouts this year. I don't even know how that would even work. Obviously you have, three levels of playing, but how do you try to assess a product, especially where you're starting a new system? How do you really try to get the most out of your tryouts to say, what type of players do we have to fit this system? Or what type of guys can maybe be, a part to this system that, they could be more situational, or, this is the bench that we have. I mean, talk about how you assess all that in a short period, shortened, tryout.
Sure. And like you said, this year was so different than every other year. Usually we have all of our coaches at all practices, and we have, 6 set of eyes on everything. But this year it was different. And when we had tryouts, we were strongly encouraged to have different cohorts and not to cross them at all. So, we had our freshman coach not coming to the varsity stuff, and the JV coach strictly doing JV stuff. And, we understand that, why we had that built in. But we tried to do all the same stuff. And something that we really try to do is a lot of small-sided games, a lot of 3-on-3, a lot of 4-on-4. Rotate them in quickly, play on the side baskets so you can really optimize the time that you have. And we just feel like small-sided games really gets you to show your skill development or lack thereof. And, it has definitely its advantages over 5-on-5. On a regular year, Anthony, we, for the varsity team, we have a conditioning test. We didn't have it this year, because we thought that all year long conditioning was going to be an issue, because we're only allowed to practice 3 times per week. So we kind of thought that, are we setting ourselves up to fail here? We're always going to be chasing it, conditioning, and that's something that, is one of my pet peeves. But we had to be rational about it and say, what, this year there's no state tournament. We're only playing 10 games. We have limited practices. Let's not waste time with that. Let's just get right into the meat of it. And that's what we did. And, when we're picking a team, we're lucky because, me, my JV coach, Patrick, we teach in the district. We know every single kid who plays basketball before they even come to tryouts. Sometimes we get the list from the athletic director of tryouts of who's trying out. We don't see a kid's name, and where's this kid? And she's like, how do you guys even know who that is? And we're like, because Patrick's at the middle school, I'm at the elementary school, and He came to basketball camp. Can we reach out to him? So we have that benefit of kind of knowing every single kid in the town, middle school up, who is into athletics, should be into athletics, has some kind of athletic ability.
Yeah, and I was going to get to that, so we'll just kind of jump to it now. I mean, how involved are you with the youth programs? I mean, when I drive around Wilmington, especially pre-COVID, you couldn't find the outdoor basketball court. The parks are packed, kids are playing, there's fields, there's always people on the fields. I mean, how involved are you with the youth basketball programs as a head coach in Wilmington?
We have a great relationship, and actually it's funny, you're going to recognize, I've already spoke about this guy. The former head coach of the boys basketball team, Joe Maiella, is now the president of the youth program and the travel program. And they have a great presence. They're all over Instagram, they're all over Twitter. The kids love it. And myself and the girls basketball coach, we have a great relationship with them. We can bring coaches into practice. This year, we really wanted to do some more of that, bring some coaches in to have like an open practice with us so they can kind of just sit down and see what we're doing, maybe bring kids to it. We love to bring the younger travel teams to halftime. You've probably seen stuff like this, where they can wear their jersey and get in for free. And then at halftime, they get out and play like a little mini game. And, everybody, it's just great to have them there. We sit them on their bench and give the kids high fives. Obviously, this year it's been difficult. Doing any kind of stuff related to that, but we're really lucky to have a great relationship with our youth program.
Yeah, and it's awesome. I mean, and especially living in this area, to see how just even the surrounding towns, there's just humongous youth programs everywhere in all these areas. And it's something that as a high school coach, it's awesome because you get to know these kids at a young age, and obviously getting involved. Some coaches are just our presence, right? Just want to be there for the kids to see and the parents to see them, to see that you're paying attention to, their children and that you're invested in them, because, when that middle school time does come, there are those other schools that are looking at them or they look intriguing to go to. So building that strong presence as, I'm the coach, I played here, I was at these fields, you're seeing this youth, involving them is always great to keep kids around to play. The other question I wanted to ask you off of this is, obviously being a Wilmington guy and growing up, is talk about how involved alumni is with your program now. I mean, being an alumni there, maybe first getting the job. I know at Arlington Catholic, when I got the job there, one of the first things I did was I reached out, to a lot of mutual guys that you and I know, and some of the younger guys that I had coached, to be like, I want an alumni presence here. I want to get alumni to come speak here. I want to get guys to show up to practice and talk to the kids. Like, I want them to feel like they have a community that backs them. And that's a little tougher in the Catholic school world to build, because you have kids coming from everywhere. But in a town, you have that town support. You have those people who've lived there a long time. I mean, talk about how involved alumni are with your program.
Well, it's most of our coaches are alum, so that can speak to it. We have a strong presence, and also, we really like to encourage the kids when they go off to college and come back. We have an alumni game. Obviously, this year is the outlier. We can't do it, but we have an alumni game, and I think last year, we had like 30 guys there. And it's great. And it's funny because we had it 2 years ago. We had our alumni game right after practice, and I had a kid on my team leaving and seeing all the alumni walking in, and he's like, "Coach, I can't wait to play in that game." And I'm thinking to myself, that's funny. I wish you were excited about playing the game that we have coming up, but that's pretty funny. So it's a strong. I'd say we have a strong group of guys who still care. They still check in. If you have a win, they send you a text or a quick DM on social media, like, "Hey man, great stuff there. I caught some of the game on the local TV." So, we'd like to build it to where it's even bigger and better, but we're pretty happy with where it is.
Yeah, I think it's just so important. I mean, I felt like, alumni was a big thing in social media, getting on Twitter. And it's how I built this. You go on Twitter and, you can find anybody. And I think social media is so important to show off your product. I had a head of social media, head of social at Boston College for football and now girls lacrosse. And the stuff he puts together, like if I'm a recruit looking to come there, comparably to some of the bigger schools out there that I was looking at their stuff, they couldn't touch this kid at BC. And, I feel like social media is just such a big presence to have out there and for people to see your program, and obviously alumni seeing that, and then they want to get involved in the program, and who knows how they want to get involved and how they want to help out, but in ways that, could help your program get things that they need or go to tournaments that are out there in all these different places. So, it is great to get that alumni back. Obviously, again, I'm going to kind of allude to your days of being here in Wilmington for a long time. I mean, talk about how the game has changed since you've been a high school player versus the game now. I mean, when I watch the NBA, I mean, before it was the dominant big man. Now it's everyone shoots, and even your 7-footer can launch threes and hit them. So the game seems like it's changed so much. I mean, how's it look in the high school world?
You couldn't be more right. It's changed so much. My whole game was that shot fake, one dribble, 18-foot jump shot that was not a three-pointer, but it was a long two, which now it's considered like the worst shot in basketball. Guys our age probably played high school basketball, and in a game you'd see 4, 5, 6 3-point attempts by each team. Well, we just played last weekend and we took 42 threes. That's the game now. That's the game. The kids have the skill set. They work on it. 3 is greater than 2. Your points per possession. It's just, it's really just mathematically and analytically a smarter brand of basketball. Even though, with like my father-in-law, we sit there and watch the game, and he tells me, they shoot too many threes, and that's the game. It's evolved. And like you said, like you turn on the NBA and, everyone's shooting. Everything is 5-out spacing away from the basket. It's almost to the point now at the NBA where they need to move the line back and raise the rim because everything's a dunk or a three-pointer.
It's crazy.
But the evolution of the game is unbelievable. It really is. I can't believe today that we run an offense, and I just told you that we shot 42 three-pointers Saturday. I never, ever, ever would have thought that those words would have come out of my mouth, especially playing for Coach McCune and coaching with Antonelli. We had structure-based offenses, like multiple screens, multiple pin downs, multiple action, trying to get a good shot. And now it's quick, space. If you're open, you're shooting.
Yeah. And I can't imagine because, when you watch, I mean, how good are kids in high school shooting the basketball? I mean, how good are they? And how much time do you work on that? I mean, that is what gets me the most curious. I mean, do the high school game have legit shooters? I mean, are there legit shooters?
Yeah. In the Middlesex League. Yes.
Yeah.
But, I saw another guy speak this summer, and he's saying shooting's the most important skill in basketball. If you don't believe that, you're looking at the game wrong. And he says, you should be getting your kids 100 to 200 shots a game. And I'm looking at my practice plan and saying, I'm not doing that. What we got to do? We got to work on our defense. We got to work on our shell drill. So this year, kind of, taking a step back and looking at ourselves and reflecting, we honestly we're averaging 150 shots per kid at practice. Okay. And they're not just, just shooting competitions. It's shots that we want to get during the game, a lot of catch and shoot threes. So we're working on it, and we're really trying to develop that skill. And high school kids have that. They really have that skill. Other teams that we play in the Middlesex, we're not crossing over this year and playing the large schools, but they have that skill set where it's lots of threes, man. Lots of threes.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me because I just, I think of just like football. I mean, every quarterback wants to be Pat Mahomes now, right? Every kid wants to sling it down the field and fire it down the field. And that's somewhat what the game has become. And, it was nice to see the Patriots a few years back going back to that I system and just pounding the rock in the playoffs where defenses, let's face it, I mean, their linebackers are more athletic. They're not your guys who are going to line up in the box and go 11 on 11 inside the box. They're not as toughly built as some of those middle linebackers back in the day. So it's just interesting to see games evolve and just how, scoring points and getting high amount of points, no matter what sport it is is just the attraction, the defense,
It,
and the 2-point, skill set game of eating the shot clock and scoring and playing good defense is just, that's not as important. Maybe in the playoffs, maybe in the finals, but even then.
Yeah, it really is. And it comes down to analytics. We all have, you guys probably had it in football, huddle. We had crossover in huddle and basketball. And so they videotape our game and they break it all down for us and show us, each possession, how many points per possession we're averaging, what our great shots are, what the kids are all averaging shooting. And the average high school team averages 35% from the floor, right? So if they're shooting 30% from threes and 40% for twos, if they take 10 threes, and they take 10 twos, they got more points per possession. They're shooting threes.
Yeah.
And the kids love the analytical and the data analysis and all that stuff. They really dive into it, and they really, you tell them this stuff and their eyes kind of light up like, oh, like this is designed to score more points. We like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, when the kids understand that, that's great too, because that means they're understanding what you're systematically trying to do and understand percentages and so on. You just got to hit the shots. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to hit them. If you take more, right, you got to hit them. Right. So you alluded to it a little bit before, how this year has been different. But talk about COVID-19. I asked a coach this last week, and I'll ask you the same exact question. Talk about some of the rule changes as a result of COVID, and maybe how you've had to change maybe the way you inbound the ball, or how you coach something up that you never really had to think about before.
Right. So there is no baseline out of bounds plays anymore, right? Anytime the ball goes out of bounds under the baseline, they give it to you up on the sideline near half court. So, everybody has their packages of baseline inbounds plays, and those are just not happening this year. And then when the ball is being inbounded on the sideline, you have to be 6 feet away from the inbounder. So it's just a different thing. The game starts with a coin flip. There's 4 different balls that are rotated into the game. They're all wiped down with hand sanitizer. There's no halftime anymore. Usually you go down to the locker room and you can draw some things up on the board, or re-go over the game plan and what the points of emphasis are for that day. We get a 2-minute break.
I mean, talk about that. Because I could imagine halftime at football not being able to go and draw sets up and readjust. I mean, talk about that in basketball. I mean, how hard is that?
And not to get too off point, but they're talking about all the modifications for football, and there's going to be no locker rooms.
Yeah.
So it for a coach, who's preparing for a game, and you got all your stuff written down that you're going over, it completely changes that aspect. Our bench, I don't know if you watched any of the NBA over the summer in the bubble.
Oh yeah.
That's how our benches look. We have chairs that are 6 feet apart in different rows. They encourage us not to huddle up at all. So even if you do call a timeout, if I'm coaching against you, Anthony, you can hear everything I'm saying because we're not huddling up. So a lot of the X's and O's and the strategic little things that you could do, that it's different, and so maybe that, talking about going to this principle-based offense, a lot of these modifications really are playing into our hand on making this switch, because you're limited in a lot of the things that you're allowed to do. Shooting a foul shot, okay? The first foul shot, no one is allowed to line up in the lane. No one. And then the second foul shot, only 2 people. So you have there's 3 offensive players, including the shooter, and 2 defensive players. So it's a clear advantage if you're a terrible foul shooter for that ball to come right back to you.
Yeah. I mean, and who knows? You draw it up, you hit it off the rim hot enough, it bounces right back to you.
We were in a situation last weekend where we thought we were going to be calling a timeout to draw up a foul shot play, similar to what you just said. So these are things that are happening.
Right. And I just find that stuff just so interesting because every coach just finds a rule. I remember when federation rules changed over in football, and I told my staff, I go, we're never going to learn all 200 and something of these rules, but let's look at the rules that are really going to affect our game. And
right.
like our opponents and maybe things that they do like cutting and things like that, we can really have an eye out for and be able to, talk to refs or say to a ref, hey, please watch this number. This kid's doing X, Y, and Z, like knowing the rules. So yeah, it's a different way of coaching. And sometimes those small things, like you said, here you are ready to draw up a play and then that happens. Right. So it's the unexpected a little bit, I guess, of COVID. Now, have you, without obviously not naming names or anything, but have you guys like been affected by COVID in the sense of like losing players or having to cancel games? I mean, how has that kind of looked for you guys?
Yeah, so we've had two different pauses or if you will stoppages. The first one was after our second tryout. Usually we have 3 tryouts before we pick teams, and the night after our second tryout, we got the notification that the season was put on pause for 2 weeks or 10 days. The kids are you're disappointed and frustrated as a coach. You're starting the season. You didn't know if the season was going to start. You're thrilled, and the kids are just devastated when that happens. So we got over that, and then we had another stoppage. We got an email on a Saturday night saying that sports, the cases were too much and the sports were done, and we were going to be without sports for 2 weeks. The school committee flipped that decision that following week, so we really only missed 2 practices, I think. But still, the emotional roller coaster for the kids, the start, stop. It's taxing on them without a doubt. It really is. We do the best we can to keep them engaged. We have a Google Classroom set up for our basketball team. We have, when we were shut down, we would set up home workouts where they could kind of keep the muscles that they use for basketball engaged. We would add those videos that I talked about sharing with the assistant coaches in the PowerPoint onto them and different stuff like that. But that's all good, but it's not the same as being in the gym with your team. Being on a team's a special thing. You know it, and I know it. And when you're told that you can't be on the team and you don't know when you're coming back, it stinks. And it's emotionally and mentally difficult for the kids to have that start-stop. But
Yeah,
I think that they've really done a great job with kind of rolling with the punches. They're thriving for some sort of normalcy, and athletics is really helping provide that.
Yeah, I mean, I think athletics is just so important with that, and these kids, I mean, let's face it, since last March, I mean, this whole thing's been crazy. I mean, there's so many aspects of that have been crazy, but the fact that like everyday ordinary life, especially for young teenage kids, and you could say for all kids, but I'm just specifically talking about this age bracket, when you have a consistent schedule that you've had in your life for a really long time, and you've always had sports to fall back on, I've always had a team to play with and something to look forward to lose that and not know exactly when you're going to get it back and how you are going to get it back when it does come back. And just that, you're playing and stopping, you're playing, you're stopping. It's mentally draining for kids. So, I know that no matter who it is or what it is, the decision's not envious of the people that have to make them, but they're trying their best to make the best decisions for people. And, it's not always going to please everybody, but, it is hard when kids lose things that they have passion about. I mean, I was a passionate player when I played. I mean, obviously everything I read about you, it's the same exact thing. So, you're passionate, but you're also emotionally attached to it. And I think that that's the hardest part that maybe people don't understand, is that the emotional attachment that a high school boy or girl has to the sport that they've played for a long time, and getting that taken away from them, or, having it, it's like putting meat in front of a dog and then pulling it away a bunch of times. Like the dog's gonna go crazy about it. So, it's the same thing. You've coached for a long time. You were an assistant, you paid your dues, you coached under a bunch of different people, you learned. Now, what's your advice to young coaches going through what you went through, now having your own program? I mean, talk about your advice to the young coaches out there who are looking to make that climb in any sport.
Right. I got a couple things. One is just be humble. I kind of touched on it earlier, but like practice is not perfect. Sports are not perfect. It's okay to make mistakes. You make a mistake, just own it. Right. You'll gain so much respect from the kids if you can call yourself out on something, right? If you make some mistake and you call yourself out, you make a joke about it and you move on, you're modeling such great behavior to them, instead of trying to be like, putting your foot down saying, no, I'm right, even when you know you're wrong. Just own it, right? And it's okay. It's okay to laugh at yourself and be humble. It's really a great skill, I think. And be confident in yourself. If you're not confident in yourself, you expect 15, 16, and 17-year-olds to be confident in you. You have to be a confident person. You have to be prepared for what you're doing. You can't just wing it. It will not work. So if you're not willing to put in the preparation and the work, then I would suggest finding another line of work. And the soccer coach that I coach under right now, Steve Scanlon, he got a great quote. He says, you can't coach forever. You might as well do it your way, because at some point, someone's going to tell you can't do it anymore. So those would be my 3 biggest phrases of advice for any young person interested in getting into the coaching field.
Yeah, it's just, and what I love about asking this question, I ask this to everybody, is it's always a different answer, right? It's always a different answer. And, we talk about game changing and the way that you coach it is changing. Like if you heard everybody just say the same robotic thing every single time, then coaching would be the most boring thing in the world. And molding it around your style is the most important thing, because at the end of the day, if you're changing who you are from jump to fit a style, then that style is never going to work, because it's not who you are,
right? That's so true. So true.
Yeah. And so when the advice I've always given to my young coaches, like, you are who you are. Like, you got to build your program around who you are. I mean, if there's some bad things, yeah, get rid of those things. But, but it has to be your personality. Kids are they're gonna flock to your personality. And the last thing I'll say is, obviously, you have a young family. You live in Wilmington for a long time. And I've talked to, Craig Turner, who's the head football coach. And I talked to longtime girls basketball coach Jay Keene on here as well. And all of them have the greatest things to say about Wilmington. But, for you really grew up in Wilmington. You were an athlete at Wilmington. You coach a team. You have a family. Talk about sacrifice, the sacrifice of time spent with family and loved ones and kids, that, coaching really, you're coaching 3 sports a year for over a decade, right? So your free time and what young kids, our age, because I did the same thing, are out doing and having fun and experiencing. You're out scouting and watching film and writing up reports and going to educate yourself, maybe going to college practices. Like, your job never stops, man. So, talk a little bit about sacrifice that goes into coaching with life.
Sure. It's funny. We're seasonal coaches. That's a good thing, because you and I know it's a year-round job. You're committed to it. But I'm so lucky that my wife, she's the best wife in the world. Both of her parents were coaches growing up and teachers, so she understands the commitment, and she understands what it takes about weekend practices and night games, and she just gets it because it was part of who she was when she was growing up. So she's great, and she brings the boys to the games. When we were allowed to have fans, to try to make it somewhat of a family environment. Of course, we have to have her sit away from everybody else, so she doesn't hear anybody say anything, well, coach, that she wouldn't like. But you're right; it's a balancing act, and the variables always change from when you and I got into this. Right? It was coaching and finishing school, right? And then it was coaching and having your first job, right? How do you balance it all? Coaching and your friends going out and all that kind of stuff. Coaching and going back and getting your master's degree, balancing it all. And then, coaching and getting married and having kids, and, the variables are always changing, and you're always trying to balance it to the best that you can. I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky to have my wife as probably my biggest supporter, but also my mother and sister and my in-laws. They help out a lot, and we try to make coaching and athletics a family thing, and to try to bring people to our games, and really helps out with the sacrifices that you have to make. So we try to change that from a sacrifice to, a family gathering, if you will.
Yeah. And that's awesome. I mean, that's awesome that, your wife was brought up around that and understanding that. That's huge, because the time away is tough. It's tough. I mean, remember just having the twins and coming home and having to be dad, and you see my poor wife who's watching infant twins all day long by herself. It can be taxing, but they understand what your dream is and what you want, and they want you to be able to do it. And that's awesome that you have that support and the coolest background in which she kind of found all this stuff, right? So yeah, so I mean, it's a double win there today. So I want to thank you for coming on. I mean, I'm in Wilmington, and I follow the sports. I love this place. I love this town. I grew up in Medford my whole life, but being up here is just like a piece to it, a family, community, and it's awesome. So to be able to talk to some of the high school coaches, it's been great. So we have our last segment of our show, our 2-minute drill. I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but basically I just fire some rapid fire questions at you pertaining to the game, and just kind of hear your perspective of it. I do get one booth review. So if I want you to explain something a little bit more, or just get into your mind about it a little bit more, I may just say, explain it, and vice versa. I may ask you a question that you're like, hey coach, can we explain it a little bit? All right. So I'm going to set our timer for 2 minutes, and here we go. What was your biggest victory as a coach ever?
Oh, my first game. I have the ball framed right there. Woburn, 2016.
Awesome. Song that you still get juiced up to, like before a game, whether as a player or as a coach, you kind of hear the song?
Oh, so simple. We listen to music while we shoot, and I put music on the other day because the kids' music stinks. It's crazy.
Yeah. And they all must look at each other like, what? And meanwhile, you're like hopping around on the sideline. As a player at Wilmington, in any sport, what team did you hate playing the most? Like, what team did you just want to beat every time you played them?
Oh, Newburyport when we were in the Cape Ann League, hands down. And now I'm friends with their coach, Dave Life, so it's kind of funny.
Oh, that's awesome. What would you rather have in your program right now, an extremely dominant big man or a point guard that can do everything really well?
Point guard who can do everything well.
I've never had a coach say center, and that's what blows my mind. Everyone's point guard, point guard. I mean, is point guard that important? Is it that important of a position?
Well, we talking about the progression of the game, everything's kind of positionless, and the skills that a typical point guard would have are the skills that we want everyone to have. There's not a lot of catching with your back to the basket. So a lot of it is positionless, and a lot of those skills that we want those positionless guys to have are skills that a typical point guard would have.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. It makes sense, especially with the game today. Let's see. How many times have you been teed up?
Oh gosh. A handful. Never thrown out of the game, but I've been warned.
That's so funny. I mean, I've had coaches on and be like, oh, once, but what happened was like, no, you got it once. That's your answer, once. Yeah, I like the honesty of saying several times.
Yeah.
Let's see. Who's the best point guard you've ever seen come through this program, either as a coach or as a player?
Might be he's not necessarily a point guard, but a kid we have right now, Tommy Mallinson. He's a guard who handles the ball. He might be the best that we've had.
That's great.
And going back to history of Wilmington, I could probably go back to like the mid '80s with some help, and he might be the best.
Wow. Okay. So we're talking like 30 plus years here. That's great. That's awesome. And last question for you, just as a Wilmington guy to a Wilmington guy, best fast food place to go to, best sub shop to go to pick something like a calzone up or a pizza.
I'm partial to North Wilmington and Pizza Mia. I know you're right across the street from them now.
Yeah.
So I would have to say Pizza Mia.
Okay, that's great to know. We order there. We get pizza quite a bit there. So that's great. That's awesome. Well, Coach, you survived the 2-minute drill. You are good. And again, I want to thank you for coming on here. I really search my coaches and I really try to do my homework on them. And I just thought you had a great story to tell. I think it's always awesome. And I know I've had that experience of going back to my high school and coaching as an assistant, multiple sports for a long time, and then being able to take over the program that you played for. And in this case, for you, being in the town and growing up and continue your career here it's awesome. I mean, it's a really cool story that I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that dream to do it and that would love to do it, and you get to experience it and do it every day. So very cool, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you so much for doing this. This is so great. And like you said, I am living my dream. When I was a teenager, when I was 13, 14, this is what I wanted to do, and I'm doing it, and I'm living my dream. So it's fantastic, and I appreciate you so much for having me on here and letting me tell my story.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think all coaches deserve it. And, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. The feedback I get, especially from the basketball world. It's something about the girls and boys basketball world. There's just a lot of love, like on Twitter and social media. I mean, the second you put a coach on that knows another coach, I get like 20 follows on Twitter, and it's like this
Yeah.
head coach of this assistant, and like everyone knows each other. And I have you on, I have Jay Keen on, and I'm hearing all these names popping up. And then some of these guys are future guests, and some of these guys I've heard this name like 4 or 5 times. And before this podcast, I didn't even know the person existed on the planet,
Right.
So it's cool. It's real
You're
cool.
gonna love your next guest, Coach Antonelli.
Yeah.
Old friend. I owe him a ton. He's a great guy.
Yeah, and I had no idea there was a connection there. So that's even kind of, real cooler to be able to like, pick it up right from where we left off, and being able to, understand you guys probably systematically in a lot of ways, I think a lot alike too. So I'm really looking forward to that interview. So, thanks for coming on. And again, from Beyond Podcast, I'm your host, Anthony Petralis. And till next time, thank you so much.